Back in September of 2018, I spoke at WordCamp New York City on the topic of podcasting. This is that presentation. Hey, this is Scott Wyden, a storyteller with a camera talking about all the things photographers like you and I are thinking about. In this video, I want to share with you a presentation I made at WordCamp New York City 2018. Now, you're a photographer watching this video, and that's okay because a lot of photographers now are thinking about doing podcasts for their clients or for their genres. For example, I have two podcasts. One is for Imagely, the company that I work for full time, and that podcast is on WordPress for photographers. The other podcast I have is a shorter podcast, a much smaller podcast. It's about branding in my home state of New Jersey. So if you're thinking about podcasting, or if just you're intrigued by the technology, the nerdy part behind it, you might want to check out this session. Now, I have to say, this recording was not made by myself. This is made by the volunteers at the WordCamp New York City. So the video is courtesy of them, and I have the ability to use it, and it is me, so I can use it anyway, but there you go. So sit back, relax, enjoy. If you're considering podcasting, here you go.
Good morning, WordCamp NYC. How are we doing? Yes. Oh my goodness, that's the best response I've had all WordCamp. That's really great. This room is special, I can tell. All right, up next we have Scott Wyden, and Scott is the Chief Community Officer at Imagely, a father, blogger, photographer, and educator. Scott is born and raised in New Jersey, and he enjoys the comfort of hiking clothes even when not hiking. He is the author of multiple photography books, and he often educates photographers about WordPress through his blog and the Imagely blog. Everybody, please join me in thanking Scott for coming to see us today and give him a warm round of applause for podcasting in 3, 2, 1, action.
That was good enthusiasm with that part. So you want to start podcasting. You want to start a podcast, you have a topic, a theme, you have guests in mind, you have all these ideas of what you can do, where you could take the podcast. The future is full of sunshine and rainbows. You've got a budget, whether big, small, but most likely small for most podcasts starting out. The CEO of Imagely gave me about $150 budget when I started because we weren't sure how well it was going to do. So basically covered the microphone and I used free software. But you're stuck because you have no idea what to do, no clue what equipment to use, what software to use, how to record, edit, or publish. But then you realize you already have a WordPress website, or you know what WordPress is. I mean, you're at a WordCamp, right? So you realize, hey, I can use WordPress. So raise your hand if you're in this boat right now. You might be in this boat. Or if you're thinking about launching a podcast, raise your hands. Wow. Okay. So I'd like to ask 3 people to raise their hand, stand up, share what the topic of your podcast might be. Anyone want to volunteer themselves? You don't have to stand up if you don't.
I have a political podcast. I'd like to give my opinions of different events that are happening in politics and have visitors come and that kind of thing.
Nice. Anyone else?
I was thinking of opening up a podcast called Coders Uncensored. So we can talk as coders, but no filters.
Nice. Talk about how much coffee is being...
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Drug addiction education.
Ooh, interesting. So 3 different subjects. As you can see, just like a blog, whatever, there's so many topics for a podcast. So I've been in the same boat. I've been there multiple times. I've hosted many podcasts, some of which have failed, some of which did fairly well for a good period of time, and one that's doing very well right now and one I just started for myself. So I'm here to help you bootstrap your podcast to fruition. Now, there isn't enough time to help with the editing process, but I can share a bit of advice before we dive into the rest. What I can tell you are these 4 things are extremely important to your podcast, editing-wise: EQ, noise reduction, compression, and a limiter. And if you're using some sort of audio software, that, whether free or paid, you're going to have these in there, Mac and PC. So at Imagely, we call ourselves the WordPress photography people. We offer themes, plugins, and turnkey sites for photographers. We make Next-Gen Gallery and one of the leading image e-commerce plugins called Next-Gen Pro. So calling ourselves the WordPress photography people made us think we should probably have a podcast for photographers using WordPress. So we made it. I pitched the idea to my boss. He gave me a $150 budget and said, make it happen. So this is our team. We're a small family of creatives around the world. This is a digital painting by one of our designers. That karate dude up in the top right, that's me. Although I'm not yet a black belt, so my instructors probably would not be happy if I showed that to them. So my name is Scott, and in addition to working for Imagely, my job is to create content for a variety of media forms, including our podcast, and to interact with our community. Aside from that, I am a professional photographer who provides headshots and personal brand photography services around New Jersey. So I recently launched a podcast called Jersey Brands as a means to connect with brands around New Jersey. It's a small, short-form podcast, not like the 45-minute episodes that we do for Imagely's podcast. And I'll talk more about that later. So this is how it's going to go. I already talked about why we podcast at Imagely. I'm going to talk about equipment, software, WordPress, services, tracking, calls to action, list building, and a bunch of other things. Now, all the slides will be available. This is being recorded for WordPress TV. You will have access to this. Don't worry. I got lots to cover, so I'm going to go fairly quick, and hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. So we record in advance of publishing. We schedule them usually 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And every episode, it goes live every other Thursday. The audio is on the website. It's on all the podcast players. The video is on the website in the show notes. And it's on YouTube. Our podcast is video and audio. As photographers, being the target audience, very visual people, they learn better seeing. So instead of it just being audio, there's some talking heads, there's some screencasts, so there's a bunch of stuff going on. So who's ever heard of Kim Doyle? The WP chick? Mm-hmm. Okay. So podcasting is without a doubt a very powerful business tool. Kim Doyle started her site design business years ago and marketed it through her podcast, The WP Chick. She has since grown beyond just WordPress and teaches content creation in general, no matter of the platform. And she's rebranded herself beyond just The WP Chick. And her podcast is actually why she's doing so well. She attributes 100% of her business success to her podcast. Now, once you can answer these 2 questions, you can choose your equipment. What is your budget, and is your podcast audio or video? Is anybody considering video podcasting? Wow, all right. So, lots to choose from. Now, for audio, the de facto mic brand for budget-oriented podcasts is Blue. Blue was recently acquired by Logitech about 3 months ago, I think, and the Blue Yeti, which is a USB mic. It's a fantastic microphone with really high-quality voice capabilities, and it's budget-friendly. And Blue recently announced the Yeti Caster. Now there's the Yeti and the Yeti Caster. The Yeti Caster, the only difference is that it's black. That's it. However, the Yeti Caster comes with a boom arm and it comes with the shock mount. in a bundle. So the microphone itself is no different besides the color, but it's coming with matching colored accessories that you might want anyway. And it's only, right now, $200. So if you don't have audio yet, if you don't have a microphone, if you have a $200 budget, this is what I recommend. If you've got a higher budget, I've got some other advice for you. So you want to make sure you use the mic in the cardioid pattern for the best possible audio quality. For this mic specifically, every mic is going to be different. You also want to make sure you talk to the correct part of the microphone. I can't tell you how often I see people talking to the wrong part of the microphone, and they wonder why it doesn't sound so good. So on the blue mic, the right place to talk, on the Yeti that is, the right place to talk the microphone is the front of the mic, which is where the blue logo is. It might look funny when you think normally you're talking with a handheld microphone right on the tip, right there. Not with the Yeti. If you're in a room where it's not soundproofed or sound dampened, then I suggest finding ways to do so, like hanging blankets on the walls or blackout drapes. Even pillows on the floor can serve as sound dampeners. All things that you might already have or can get access to for extremely cheap. Acoustic foam is great for those with a higher budget. It adds up, and it adds up fast. So if you have a higher budget, go for the acoustic foam. One of the cool things about acoustic foam is you can actually hide it behind artwork. So if you want to hang artwork wherever you're recording, you can print some canvases of your artwork, you can have some paintings, and you can actually stick the acoustic foam behind it. That's my daughter singing and dancing in a very busy mall. So if you want to talk about echo and reverb, that's what you have to worry about, even in tiny rooms. For those with higher budgets, know that an XLR-based microphone, and one specifically designed for voice, like that Shure mic, is always going to outperform a USB mic. No matter the brand, no matter the price level, an XLR mic will do better. But you will need a preamp, a mixer, something to handle the power problems and the volume problems that come with an XLR microphone. So this is a pretty good higher budget kit. You're talking the Mackie mixer is probably around $250 or so. The Shure mic itself is about $500. And then you've got the boom arm, which is $100. This is a fantastic boom arm, quiet, yeah. So I'm currently using the Yeti with that Rode boom arm. Eventually I'll be upgrading to that Shure mic, but all a matter of time. For video, for those doing video, the most common webcam used for podcasting is the C920 from Logitech. It's 1080p, tripod mountable, and it's extremely high quality. And it's got really nice shallow depth of field, so whatever's behind you will be blurred. If you want to go a step up, the Logitech Brio is their 4K version. The problem with, it's a great webcam, but the problem with it is that not all software supports 4K yet. So depending on what software you're using for the video recording, it may not get that high quality 4K visual. Now, if you want to go all out and you've got a DSLR that does video, or if you have a mirrorless camera that does video with an HDMI port, you can use iSkin's Capture. I think it's around $200, but it allows you to take your, a professional camera and actually use that as a webcam. So you can get the actual, whatever lenses you want to use, you can control it all. It's really nice. So as a bonus for lighting purposes, I would consider a light stand and some sort of ring light for simplicity. You can put the webcam or your camera, whatever, inside of the ring light. A lot of beauty vloggers will use this, but it's great for just podcasts. Now the light will be about $100 itself. The light stand, for a budget-friendly light stand, you're looking between $20 and $80. If you just want to use your room light to get started, do that, and then as you can, upgrade. But when you have everything in place, you have a very flexible, great sounding, well-illuminated kit for your budget-friendly needs. My home studio is in a basement. The walls, we happen to buy a house that has sound dampening wall panels. Not sure how that worked out, but it did. I have a drop ceiling, so my only issue is drop ceiling, which I eventually plan to soundproof. There are ways to do that with drop ceilings. And depending on the format of your show, you've got different options for how you want to record. So if you're by yourself, there's free software for Mac and Windows, Audacity. Completely free, no expenses at all, and it can do a really good job. Also, if you're by yourself, GarageBand for Mac is even better. It gives you tons of effects and control over each audio track that you want to control. If you have multiple guests and you're in the same place, then either Audacity or GarageBand will also be great, but you might need a mixer and multiple mics depending on your needs. If you have the Blue Yeti, you can turn the recording pattern into a 360 and record the entire room. One mic can get multiple people. If you have multiple guests and you're in different places, then software like Ecamm's Skype call recorder. I'm not a big fan of Skype just because I'm constant drops of calls, but Ecamm's Skype recorder is fantastic. Zencaster, there's no E near the end, and Zoom, which is very popular as well. Now, Skype also now has its own built-in recording feature, but I haven't tested it, and again, I'm not a big fan of Skype, so I can't really say much about it. But we actually use, at Imagely, we use a combination of YouTube Live and Zencaster. So the reason, and I'll talk about this a little bit, the reason why I like Zencaster so much is because it uses technology right now only found in Chrome that allows each person's audio in the call to be recorded to their computers in temporary storage. And then, when the recording the call is done, it will then upload each of those files individually to a Dropbox account that you specify. So you're getting the absolute purest, best quality audio from each person on the call, including yourself and each of your guests. And Zencaster is free, but it does have some paid upgrades, like post-production right inside of the software. It starts at $18 a month for anybody who wants to upgrade and have like unlimited amount of guests. So I said we use YouTube Live and Zencaster, and the reason for this is because YouTube Live, which used to be called Google Hangouts, it can record video and audio. But the reason why we use it with Zencaster is because the audio and video are always out of sync in the recordings. So I figure if I'm about to fix the audio-video sync, I might as well get better audio quality out of it and use Zencaster. So that's what we do. Zoom can do really good quality. It is very limited in the free version, so in order to get unlimited recording time and guests, you'd have to upgrade to their $15 a month plan. Now, talking about plugins, there are two very popular plugins for podcasting in WordPress. The one that I'm going to be talking about from here on is called Seriously Simple Podcasting. It was originally made by Hugh Lashbrook from Automatic as a side project, before Automatic said no more side projects. So he sold it to Castos. Castos was born. The plugin has not changed in a negative way. It's only been improved, and I've been really happy to see that. I love SSP because it's extremely simple. This is the description of the plugin, and I've highlighted some seriously smart pieces. It's simple, uses all the native components, and it does not distract you from getting an episode live. And this is what the menu looks like in the back end. The calendar menu item is actually from the plugin editorial calendar, which means I can drag and drop when I want an episode to actually go live. I can change the schedule if I have to, real quick. The Yoast SEO stuff, fully integrated. And the archive settings is actually because we're using the Genesis theme. So as you can see, for the most part, it basically looks like blog posts in that menu. This is the plugin settings. This is where you add the title of the show, the categories, the descriptions, and you grab your RSS feed right there at the top. And here's where you want to submit all of your RSS feed to the most popular players. Spotify is not yet available to anybody to just submit and get their podcast on. They're very selective. They're working with partners first, which you'll hear about in a little bit. So in the meantime, if you're going to be hosting yourself, you're limited to these 3 popular ones. There's tons of others that you might want to submit to, though. If you plan on using Castos for hosting the files, then this is actually where you would add the API. They make it really easy, and we'll talk more about why you might want to do that later. But SSP basically uses a custom post type. So every new episode looks as though it's a blog post, like I said. So when you create a new episode, the post title is the visible title of the episode. It's what people see in their podcast readers, for the most part. It's what they see on the website. This is shown on all podcasting platforms except Apple Podcasts, because Apple likes to complicate things. So the editor area is actually where you add show notes, other information you want visible on each episode. You can add images, videos, whatever. Those probably won't show up in the podcast players, but it will show up on the website, which is always a good thing. Then the podcast meta box is where you actually specify a lot of episode information, whether it's audio or video, whether it's a shorter or a full episode, when it was recorded, and specify Apple Podcast items. Because, like I just said, Apple likes to complicate things. They recently started requiring titles to not have episode numbers. So they're showing it in a different way. So because of that, there's now a meta box where you can put in the Apple-specific items, and then the RSS feed tells Apple what episode number it is and all of that fun stuff. The plugin will automatically determine the duration and the file size of the episode. It'll be calculated automatically, so you don't have to fill it in manually. Saves a little bit of time. You can store the media file on your server, wherever you're hosting. You can use another server of choice, like Amazon S3. You can use Castos System and their CDN. You could just paste the link from wherever the MP3 file it is living, and it'll grab it. Or video file, if you're doing a video podcast. And this is how we structure our episode. The post title, like I said, is the episode title. The featured image is the episode image. We include a bio of the guests, what we discussed, where to find the guest, and even links to other places that were mentioned. And if you notice at the top right, there's episode stats. So there's a little widget that will show you briefly how many plays that this episode has had. Now this is a screenshot from before the episode went live, so that's why there's no stats shown. This is the meta box of the episode. You can see it's got the duration, everything in there, when it was recorded, all that stuff. We don't use iTunes seasons, so I just leave that blank. And this is what it looks like on the front end. Got the player, download the file, open a new window, all that stuff is all there, and it just looks clean and simple. And this is the extensions section of Seriously Simple Podcasting. Now, podcast hosting, the first extension you see there, is not actually an extension. It's kind of weird placement for it. That's actually where you would go and buy their service and grab their APIs. You're not actually installing an extension because they built it into the plugin itself. But I do highly recommend installing 2 extensions. Seriously Simple Stats is really good because now you'll get some stats about your episodes, how your podcast is doing. And Seriously Simple Genesis support if you're using the Genesis theme. Now, if you have multiple hosts that rotate on a regular basis, and a podcast like, anybody listen to WP Roundtable? No? One? Okay. So there's some podcasts that have the same hosts, but not always on every single episode. But the hosts are always the same people on the show. And that's where basically it adds a taxonomy where you can say, you know, John is a host, and Jim is a host, and Jane is a host. And then with each episode, you can pick which hosts were actually on this episode. I do not recommend using the Seriously Simple Transcripts extension only because it just creates a download link for the text file. I'll have a better idea for you in a little bit of what you can do with your transcripts. Now, if you're hosted by a shared server, I do not recommend to use your host for your episode files. It's just, you're asking for trouble. You're asking for your site to go down. If your podcast starts getting busy, that's going to be a lot of traffic to a shared host that may not be able to handle it. But if you're on a cloud host, a VPS host, a dedicated server, you should have more than enough bandwidth to handle it. But ensure that your upload limits are higher than your file size of your typical episode. MP3s are usually 1 megabyte per minute. So if your episode's 60 minutes, your MP3s will be roughly 60 megabytes. So our upload limit, because ours are typically 45 minutes, our upload limit is 100 megabytes. I don't have to worry about going a little over 45 minutes. Now, if you're using your own website to host your files, there's no additional hosting costs for you. You're already paying for hosting. You're good. You don't have to pay for additional stuff. You may have to increase your storage depending on who you're hosting with and what plans you're on and things like that. And if you're using Seriously Simple Podcasting and you want to start going to an external host, that's where Castos comes in handy. Like I said, the integration is seamless. Castos has some bonus features like automated publishing to your YouTube channel with a cool visual element. Things that I'm doing manually using a service, they're automating for you, saving you some time. Castos starts at $15 a month. I haven't used it because we have a dedicated server and we just host everything ourselves. But you never know. At some point, we might have to go to an external service. Now, if you want something really future-thinking for external hosting, something way ahead of the curve and just overall awesome, then consider Transistor FM. It's already used by Kickstarter and Cards Against Humanity, and is actually made by Cards Against Humanity. It offers direct publishing to Spotify. They're one of the Spotify partners. So if you create your podcast on Transistor, it's going on Apple, it's going on Google, it's going on Stitcher, it's going on Spotify already. Transistor starts at $16 a month. You can host unlimited podcasts for the one price point. Now, Anchor is what I use for my short form podcast that I just started. It's a good option for shorter podcasts. I wouldn't recommend it for long episodes. It's great for those who need something on the go with no overhead at all. But it has some downsides, like the inability to really integrate with WordPress in any way. It does give you an embed player, so you have that advantage. You can embed it on your site. And it distributes your show for you to all the different platforms, including Spotify. Now, one of the cool things is that with Anchor, when you post a new episode, you can literally record a new episode by picking up your phone and talking to it like you're on a phone call. And they have some intense algorithms that will actually clean up your audio to make it sound more professional. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, and they do it in real time. So the moment you stop recording, you sound better. I don't get it. So I'm using it to host my Jersey Brands podcast. I have 4 episodes published as of today, but my plan is to publish a new blog post with each episode that goes live. And that's going to help me reach more brands for my photography business. And I can do this, the most recent episode I did on a rainy day when I was out and about, and I just did it on the fly. Now, both Castos and Transistor FM have one-click conversions to their platform. So if you want to start hosting and hosting yourself and then transition down the road, you can do that with one click, which is a really nice thing. Now, obviously, if you're using SSP, going to Castos is a big advantage because it's so deeply integrated. But if you're going to something like Transistor or somewhere else, you're going to have some more work to do. But if you're hosting it yourself and you're using SSP and it's stats extension, then you're going to get some very useful stats based on the RSS feed activity. These stats are for all episodes and individual episodes. You can look at it both ways. You can get an overview of how you're doing at a given week compared to previous weeks. You can see spikes related to publishing dates. You can see where people are listening from, like what apps and services people are listening from. I use Pocket Casts on my iPhone and on my computer. Unfortunately, it doesn't see that, so it falls under Other. Not Pocket Cast, Downcast, sorry. I use Downcast. But it's starting to aggregate from a lot, and eventually we'll start seeing Spotify show up there and things like that, whatever it starts tracking. So you can determine what topics attract the most listeners, and you can, again, dial down per episode. It's a beautiful thing. Now, one thing podcast stats cannot give you are true subscriber counts, since there is no standard for it yet. So it's very sad that you have to sort of guess yourself or use a service to guess for you. So by using Castos and Transistor FM, they have an algorithm that can actually estimate the number of subscribers based on listens and download trends. So if somebody doesn't subscribe but they're downloading all the time, by literally clicking a download button, then these two services will incorporate that into its subscriber count to give you a more accurate number. It'll give you the location, the physical location of listeners, and how long people are listening to each episode for. So you get a lot more stats-wise than you would otherwise, because RSS feeds alone can only do so much. But congrats, your show is now live on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, maybe Spotify, everywhere, and now it's time to improve it or dance in a princess dress with a giant stuffed bear and a laundry basket. That's her boat. So now let's talk about calls to actions, list building, things that you would do to get people to subscribe, engage, and leave reviews. On the left, you see the player of our episodes. You'll see that it even has our branding. It has the ability to download, to subscribe on the different channels. And I'm sure once Spotify is more open, SSP will offer the integration with that to include the subscribe links there. In the sidebar, the image on the right, you'll see we have the 3 latest episodes, and we have a widget of where people can subscribe using Font Awesome. We just made a bunch of icons that show up as buttons, and you can click and subscribe, including by email. So we have a lot of people who subscribe by email, so they just get an email and they can go and listen. They don't have to actually subscribe in a podcast player. They can do it on their own time. Now at Imagely, we test everywhere, from our software to our marketing efforts. And it's crucial for an individual with a business or a multi-person business to always test and to test everything that you can. Always be testing. So one of the ways we test is using OptinMonster. We use OptinMonster to test calls to action with pop-ups. And what you see here is actually a slide up on desktop, and we have 3 different versions. We test it at different times, we test it in different colors, we test all these different things on desktop. And on mobile, we're testing with a mobile bottom bar. Same thing, A/B testing all the time. And by the way, if anybody was sitting in the last session here talking about A/B testing using services, Google Optimize is free and allows you to do basically unlimited A/B testing on your site, and it's very visual and very easy to use. Now, in every episode, we ask our guests to ask a question to listeners. The question can be anything, and many times these guests use it for market research. We then ask listeners to comment on the show notes page or on the YouTube video with their answers. And if you have a Facebook group around your business, around your podcast, then it might be the perfect place to get something like that. If you're going to have guests, direct them to your Facebook group, have them engage there. Whatever is best for you is what you should do. We also made it possible for listeners to ask us questions. We send them to a URL, very easy URL to remember, and they can just send us a question and we'll use that question potentially in a future episode. Now, optimizing covers a variety of things like branding, intros, outros, search engine optimization, quality show notes. There's a wide range of ways that you can optimize each episode in your podcast overall. Earlier, I talked about branding the player. That's extremely important. You don't want it to be a generic player. You want to match the branding on your site. And SSP makes it very simple to do, just to choose the colors for each part of this. Otherwise, it's just the typical OEmbed style audio player that comes in WordPress. And what you see here at the top left is the main podcast image. Then below that is an episode image. And on the one on the right is a Pinterest optimized image. All three have consistent branding with colors. They all go very well together. You also want to make sure that your show notes are optimized with information for search engines. Include links to relevant places discussed in each episode. Don't leave anything out. People are going to wonder, and if you leave something out, you're going to get complaints. You're going to get bad reviews. They talked about this and didn't tell me where to go. Include everything. If you have a guest, include links to where your guests want the listeners to go find them. Websites, social channels, whatever. And last but definitely not least is include your transcription. Anybody sit in Rachel Cherry's accessibility session yesterday? Good. So you probably understand why transcripts are so important. Not only for those with different disabilities, but also for SEO purposes. And if you look at the word count, a podcast episode with the word count, almost 7,600 words, that's because of a transcription. So if you think about this, it means that all the organic keywords discussed in the episode are helping the SEO of that episode, which in turn helps the podcast, which in turn also helps the website overall. Domino effect. Now, there are 3 transcription services I would recommend. Rev and SpeechPad are 2 of the top transcription services. They're both affordable. SpeechPad is $2 a minute. Rev is $1 a minute. I don't know why SpeechPad hasn't lowered their price to compete, but there you go, $2 a minute, $1 a minute. So for a long time, for 2 years, we were paying about $45 an episode to transcribe each episode. And then Rev decided, hey, we're going to make an AI version of our service, and they created Temi. Temi is a whopping 10 cents a minute. So now we're paying about, a couple dollars for an episode. Sometimes, depending on if it's a shorter episode, we're paying like 50 cents, $1. It's so affordable. Now, it's not as precise as human transcriptions. You will need to use a spelling and a grammar checker. You have no choice. The AI will screw up, I promise you. But for the price, you can't really beat it, especially for a podcast transcription. So our transcriptions look like this in HTML. As you can see, we wrap the actual transcription in a div so that we can style it on the front end. But in podcast players, they don't see the styling, they just see the transcription. This is what it looks like on the front end. I don't think it's enough contrast on the screen to see, but basically the main page is white, but behind the transcription, it's actually gray with smaller text than the rest of the page. So it stands out. It stands out, it's smaller, and it just helps the SEO. Now, since officially switching to Temi, this is the introduction that we use, which lightens the fact that we're using AI-based transcriptions. So let's quickly go through marketing. We have a few minutes left. We're going to talk about emails. We send out an email using MailChimp the night an episode airs, and we do this because for Apple Podcast rankings and for YouTube rankings, the more listens and views your episode can get the day that your episode airs, the better it will do overall. We post teasers on Instagram TV, Instagram Stories, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and so on. Plus, the YouTube videos are their own form of social media. And a lot of our social media posts are done using a service, Buffer, and the premium plugin WP to Buffer Pro. We automatically publish everything we can, and then we manually publish everything we can't. And on Instagram, we highlight each episode in a story highlight on our profile. This is an Instagram story. It's a 1-minute teaser, which we use on Instagram TV, and then we splice it into 15-second pieces for Instagram stories. This is a Facebook playlist, just like YouTube has video playlists, Facebook does as well. We do 1-minute teasers there. We have a Pinterest board of every single episode. We also share to industry boards. We have a Facebook post where we tag our guests, and we advertise that. This is a tweet reminder that goes out right before the next episode. But we do not ask our guests to promote the podcast to respect their time. We will provide them with the graphics, though. But if you think your guest is interested in promoting the podcast where they appeared, then this is a great plugin to consider recommending to them. And we make our teasers using Photoshop. We use ScreenFlow for the video teasers, and Headliner app is where I manually create the AV teasers, which Castos will automatically will do for you. I use Headliner app, which is free right now to use. So asking for reviews on your podcast is okay. You can put in calls to actions in each episode, in your outros, and social media and emails. It's okay to ask, but no, you might get reviews you don't like. And this is where having thick skin comes into mind and the mindset to adapt to requests. 2 final tips, and hopefully I have time for a question or two. If you don't feel confident that you can produce a polished intro and outro, hire someone to do it. We hired John Mellet, who created the intros for Pat Flynn and Amy Porterfield. He was crazy affordable. I was shocked. We gave him a starter script, and in 1 week we had the intros and outros with licensed music as MP3 files. 1 week. He was only $600 for this. If you want to make Apple's new and upcoming features before you launch your podcast, have 3 to 5 episodes recorded, a bunch of people ready to leave positive 5-star reviews. Publish the bulk of your episodes the first day, have people leave reviews, and then a day or two later, publish the next episode and then another. This will get the attention of the Apple Podcast algorithm, and with this approach, our podcast made new and noteworthy in all of its categories. And one more tip, so it's actually 3. If your podcast will be video, check out Morning Fame. It's really the best tool for YouTube growth, and it's the absolute best platform-specific keyword research tool I've ever seen. So thank you for listening. I hope I have time for a question or two. Yes?
If your podcast just consists of you and someone on the phone and it's all audio, is it possible to do it without buying any equipment or paying for any services?
So you can do it with, so Ecamm's Skype call recorder is $15. Right? I haven't tried Skype's built-in one, but that's free. You could just use headphones and the Apple headphones or anything. To get started, just do whatever you can, what's in the budget. And then you improve from there. If it starts making you money, start getting better equipment. It's perfectly fine. People do it all the time. There's a very popular podcast that's a woman who teaches other women business owners about business and marketing, and she started literally recording in her bathroom using headphones, and now she's starting to do better. And her podcast is top of the business category. So, yeah, yes?
2 things. MailChimp will allow you to embed a file. Can you actually use MailChimp for your podcast?
We do use MailChimp to send the podcast episodes through an RSS email, but we don't embed the actual episode. We link back to the page of the episode, and we link to iTunes and Stitcher and all those different places.
Well, they'll let you load the file.
Yeah, you could include an MP3, but then your email is going to be giant, or might hit some spam blockers depending on the platform.
No, it just has the link to the MailChimp server.
Right, but it might still hit some spam blockers.
Secondly, is Vimeo a valid host?
Vimeo?
Yeah.
It's fantastic so I use Vimeo only for private video content, because otherwise, if you want public content, the number 2 search engine in the world is YouTube. If you want public content, go where people are.
Would you use both?
You can. Yeah, there's no harm if you want to use both, as long as you're not doing, trying to rank both equally, because now you might have duplicate content issues between those and your own site. But
How do you make money with this? You advertise or what?
so at Imagely, we don't advertise our we don't accept ads. We're just trying to teach the photographers. So what we have found, without pitching our product, is people are buying and saying, "Hey, I listened to this episode and I just bought your software." So we know it's working, but we don't have numbers.
How do other people make money with this?
You can accept ads. You can have a company say, "Hey, your topic and our business, go well together." So you can